stories. This happened around 2 years ago, and it still scares me when I think about it. First, a little background. My name is Jesse, and I live in the UK, and I am from a small area, nothing fancy. I'm 18, and at the time I was 16 and working for a family friend's pub collecting glasses. I'd work from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, and I lived about a half an hour to 45 minutes away. To get home, I had to walk through a park. Now, this park was 3 entrances and 3 exits, 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom, which led into the town center main shopping area. The 2 led to 2 different areas. One is a skate park, and the other one is literally right next to a comprehensive school and a big field lights. Each entrance was a big gate, and they were always open. I worked at the pub for a year and had to do the same routine going home. I'd leave around 11, sometimes a few minutes before, sometimes a few minutes after. It took about 10 minutes to get to the park, so I'd be walking through the park at around half 11 sometimes, or even 15 minutes past. Now, the one entrance I had to use to get into the park was the one at the bottom, the one that leads to the shopping area. It had 1 lamppost outside the gate, and that was it. That was the only light, so I could see about 10 feet into the park, and there was a few benches. No one was ever in the park when I walked through it from work. During the autumn, winter weeks, it was always empty. Even the streets were. So you can imagine my shock when I seen a man sitting on the bench as I walked through the park gates. Now, this was so strange. It's around 45 minutes past 11, almost 12 at night. It's pitch black and freezing, and this dude is just sitting there on the bench. Okay, maybe he was smoking crack. I couldn't see him too well at first, but as I got closer, I got a good look at him. He was young, around 20 to 25. Long hair and a ponytail, but not scruffy. It was tight and neat. He had a hoop earring, and his nose was pierced. I can't remember his eye color. He was so pale, and his hair was jet black with red tips, which went past his shoulders. He wore all black, which automatically makes him scary. He dressed like an emo, to be honest. Looking back now, he kinda reminds me and looks like Dracula from the movie Van Helsing. He was on his phone and looked up at me as I walked towards him, and he just stared at me as I walked past. I gave him a slight nod and smile and kept walking. He just looked me up and down, smirking, which freaked me out. He didn't say anything, and I imagined that he was going to bite me. The next night, when I got off of work and my shift had finished and walked through the park, again he was there on his phone, wearing all black hair and a ponytail. He looked up and seen me and smiled. I smiled back. Walked a bit faster past him again. He said nothing. This happened the next night, but on the 4th night he wasn't there. I walked through the park as usual, but I felt so uneasy. It was pitch black, no light except for the moon. And what do I hear? Footsteps. Quick footsteps behind me. So I turn around, and there is nothing there. Absolutely nothing. I wasn't taking any chances, so I ran through the park, and I swear over the sound of my heart beating fast and my footsteps, I hear twigs snapping and leaves crunching. After that, I started getting a lift home for about 2 weeks from a friend. Then that friend went on holiday, so I had to start walking home through the park again. Great friend. First night, which was Monday night, the man wasn't there, but I still felt uneasy, like I was being watched. Second night, he was there, sitting on the bench, smiling and looking at me, but this time he spoke. In a very deep voice, he said, "Hey, baby. Love the tights and your shirt. Damn." I was wearing a black shirt and sheer tights. with thick black thigh-high socks and Doc Martens. Of course you were, poser. I looked at him awkwardly, smiled, and hurried away. The next few weeks, he'd be in the park and make sexual comments, but always sat on the bench. I'd try and get lifts home when I could, but I'd still have to walk through the park most of the time. Lord, I hated that walk. One night things escalated. I walked through the park as usual, and again, he was there sitting, smiling at me. I did my best to ignore him, as he made comments about my body and what he wanted to do to me. As I was walking away, I was out of the light and could only see 2 to 3 feet in front of me. I must have been about 20 feet away when I heard running behind me, and when I turned around, bam, someone runs into me full speed and knocks me to the floor. I feel a heavy weight on me and instantly feel my hair in my face and a hand over my mouth. A familiar deep voice tells me not to fight and that it'll be over quicker if I don't fight. It's him. He's on top of me, and his hands start wandering down my tummy, and he starts to lift my skirt up. I hear a zipper, and he's rambling about how he knows I want this, and how he's been waiting to do this for so long. He took his hand off my mouth, and that's when I took my chance. I bit him really hard. Really, really fucking hard, and he screamed. He sat up off of me, and I could barely see, but he was holding his hand and cursing at me. So I took that opportunity to push him off and get up. I started to run, and I heard him running after me. I ran towards the first gate, the only one I usually use to leave, and was shocked and mortified to see it was locked somehow. I could see it had a lock on it because the lamppost on the other side shone into the usually open gate. I was so confused, but I could hear him shouting, and I started to run again, and I ran towards the other gate, and it was closed. But not all the way. There was a small gap, so I squeezed through it. I just managed to squeeze through as he tried to grab me, and I turned and looked at him for a few seconds, catching my breath. He stared at me, then started to try and fit through the gate, so I booked it as fast as I could. I ran towards the skate park path. The skate park was full of bushes. On one side of the path that ran through it, it was also a long dark path, which often is about 20-minute walk down and leads to a main road, but it's usually completely dead. I ran through the skate park and hid in the bushes, waiting for him. I had ran onto the long path. I'd be visible, and he'd be able to see me, chase me, and since no one was around, I'd stand no chance. The path that led to the roads had very few lights, but still had enough so he'd see me and be able to find me. I sat in the bushes, hiding, with my hand over my mouth. I sat for a minute, and when I seen him running through the skate park looking for me, he slowed down near the entrance path, which leads to a long path, and he literally stood there for a minute, sniffing the air. No joke, he was sniffing the air. His hair wasn't in a ponytail anymore. It was all over. He wasn't wearing a coat. He wore a long-sleeved shirt, all black. It was winter, which confused me, since it was so damn cold. He looked around, and I felt his eyes scan me. Then he kept looking, and started walking down the long path. After about 10 minutes, I felt it was safe, and ran back towards the park, and ran into the park, and ran to the gate I usually go through to get home. It was still locked, so I climbed over it. I walked towards the school following the path I always used and had a strange urge to look back, and there, at the gate, the man was standing. Just standing, watching me. He laughed and he said, "One day, I will get you, bitch. Mark my words." And he blew me a kiss and walked away into the darkness. I have never been so scared in all of my life. I booked it home and told my mom what had happened. She called the police and council and asked why the fence was locked. The council was just as confused as I had been because they never locked the gate, ever. The police could not do much as usual. They put a warning out, and that was about it. The creepy thing was that he had to have learned my pattern. He had to have known that I used the park every night to get home. It creeps me out to this day knowing I was being watched and could have been assaulted, or worse. I still have nightmares from time to time about him and wonder what would have happened to me had I not gotten away, or had he seen me in the bushes. I quit working at that pub and haven't used the park since. My mom last saw her father and brother when she was a toddler and was reunited with them 40 years later. My newfound uncle lived with his girlfriend some 200 miles away from us, so we were making trips every other weekend or so to visit them. The girlfriend had kids from prior relationships, many kids, at least 5, probably more. Her eldest was in his early 30s and still lived with her. He was what would be now classified as a neckbeard. I was 11 or 12 at the time. I was a promiscuous child, so perhaps my behavior or taste may have indicated something older, but my age wasn't kept a secret, and there were certainly adults in the vicinity at any time who knew exactly how old I was. I have vague memories of him, of having interesting conversations, of him seeming to appreciate my supposed maturity. I, a mere child, stopped in the living room and watched the Hudsucker Proxy with him and understood it. So shocking. Much impressed. So it may sound like I'm leading up to him being a creep, but he actually remains, in my memory at least, a pretty cool guy. So, why is my story here? Well, his mom seemed to encourage our friendship a bit more than one would expect. She seemed to think she was a matchmaker, and would comment on how I was the perfect woman for her son, how he could settle down with me, what a cute couple we made. Once again, I was 11 or 12 years old. He was in his early 30s. This was America in the 90s. If you were hoping for some cultural explanation, anyway, the most I remember is us as a family going out to this big breakfast buffet and the mom being creepily interested and insistent that he drive me back to the house in his truck, ruling out any other passengers who may have needed a ride. She winked at him and suggested he show me the scenic route. So he drove around for a while and pointed out random landmarks in an admittedly history-laden city. Then we went back to the house, where his mom nudge nudge wink winked him the rest of the day. For unrelated reasons, my uncle broke up with her soon after, and we did not go back. If you are new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are
already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.